The highway cut through the heart of Georgia like a dark vein under a storm. Wind tore through the pine trees, rain slashed against the windshield, and thunder rolled in the distance like a warning, too late to heed. Inside the black Aston Martin, Peter King gripped the steering wheel with both hands. His knuckles were pale, his eyes bloodshot. He had driven for hours without direction, just the need to keep moving to stay ahead of whatever was chasing him inside his own head. The radio played a jazz station, but even Coltrane's saxophone couldn't drown out the echo of a voice he couldn't forget. "You love winning more than you love me." His ex-wife's words looped through his mind like a curse. He'd built empires out of steel and glass, bought companies, bought politicians. But he couldn't buy the one thing that had slipped through his fingers, peace. Tonight he was driving away from the courthouse where he'd signed the divorce papers, away from the mansion that now felt like a tomb, away from the mirror that showed a man who'd achieved everything except meaning. Rain intensified, pelting the car like shattered glass. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him, a message from his assistant. "Mr. King, the press knows. They're waiting outside your building." He ignored it. He pressed harder on the gas headlights slicing through the fog. That was when it happened. A flash of lightning, a deer leaping across the road. He jerked the wheel too late. Tires screeched, metal screamed, and the world spun. The last thing he saw was the guardrail exploding into sparks. Then darkness. Across the highway, a small sedan slowed to a stop. Vivian Johnson, a nurse just off a 12-hour shift, squinted through the storm. Her wipers couldn't keep up with the sheets of rain. She saw the wreck, the car upside down, smoke-rising lights, flickering like a dying heartbeat. Her own heart leapt to her throat. Without thinking, she grabbed her medical kit from the back seat, pushed open the door, and ran into the storm. Rain stung her face, soaking her scrubs, but adrenaline drowned out everything else. She slid to her knees beside the overturned car and peered inside. A man was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from his temple, his chest barely moving. "Sir, can you hear me?" She shouted over the thunder. No response. She smashed the window with her flashlight, crawled halfway inside, unbuckled his seatbelt and dragged him out, her arms trembling under his weight. His expensive suit was soaked, his wristwatch still ticking absurdly, as if mocking time itself. She laid him flat on the asphalt. Rainwater mixed with the blood spreading beneath his head. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, faint pulse. Her breath caught. "Come on, stay with me." Vivian began chest compressions, counting under her breath, voice hoarse. Her world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat, the slap of rain, and the distant cry of thunder. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. She tilted his chin, gave him a rescue breath, then another. Nothing. Her hands shook. She pressed harder. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered. Then a gasp, a weak cough. His chest rose. His eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused, catching the faint streetlight behind her. Rain dripped from her eyelashes onto his cheek. "Hold on," she said softly, touching his face. His lips moved, barely audible. "Don't let go." Vivian felt something twist in her chest. Not fear, not pity, but something deeper. Something like recognition. As if somewhere in another life she had already promised this man she wouldn't. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights began to pulse through the rain. She stayed with him, her knees numb against the cold pavement, whispering, "You're going to make it. Just breathe for me." He blinked once, trying to focus. Through the haze, he saw her face, warm brown skin, glistening with rain, eyes fierce and kind all at once. A halo of lightning lit her silhouette. If angels existed, he thought they wouldn't have wings. They'd look exactly like this. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics pulled her away, gently taking over. Vivian stood there, chest heaving, as they loaded him into the stretcher. One of the EMTs asked, "Ma'am, are you family?" She hesitated. "No, just someone who couldn't drive past." Her clothes clung to her body, heavy with water. She looked down, her hands were trembling, blood smeared across her palms. His blood. A paramedic handed her a towel. "You probably saved his life." Vivian nodded faintly, but inside, something shifted. She'd saved countless patients before, but this felt different, like she'd been meant to be there. As if fate had been waiting for this intersection, this storm. She turned to watch as the ambulance sped away, its lights vanishing into the distance. The night was silent again except for the rain. Back inside the ambulance, Peter's consciousness flickered. He heard voices distant and echoing. He saw flashes lightning through the glass, the blurred face of the woman who had pulled him out. Her eyes haunted him, even as the world tilted away again. Then darkness swallowed everything. Morning broke over Atlanta. Vivian sat in the hospital waiting area, still in her soaked uniform. She hadn't planned to follow the ambulance. Her car was stuck on the shoulder engine, drowned. But when the paramedic told her which hospital they were taking him to, something inside her refused to leave. Now, under the sterile white lights, she felt foolish. What was she doing here? Nurses saved people all the time. It was part of the job. And yet the image of his eyes, lost, desperate, wouldn't leave her. A young intern walked past with a clipboard. Vivian stopped him. "The man from the crash last night. Is he alive?" the intern said. "They're stabilizing him now. You really did a number on him in a good way." Vivian exhaled shakily, relief softening her shoulders. She turned toward the exit. Time to go. Time to let it go. But as she pushed open the glass doors, a voice called from behind her. "Miss Waite." She turned. A nurse she knew, Carla, jogged over, holding something. "You left this in the ambulance." It was a watch, heavy gold engraved on the back, AK, for the man who has everything and still feels nothing. Vivian traced the letters with her thumb. The name tugged at something familiar, a headline, a magazine cover. She realized then who he was. Peter King, the youngest billionaire in the country, the one whose divorce had been all over the news last month. Her stomach sank. She wasn't supposed to know him. People like him lived in a world built on walls, money, privilege, power. People like her were the ones standing outside looking in. She handed the watch back. "You should return it to him." Carla smiled. "He's unconscious, honey. Maybe you can give it back when he wakes up." "You're the one he mumbled about in the ER, said don't let her go." Vivian froze. Something in her chest fluttered, not quite fear, not quite hope. She tucked the watch into her pocket. "I'll think about it." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale gray, the kind of color that promised more storms. Vivian walked to the bus stop, her shoes squelching with every step. She felt the ache in her arms, the chill under her skin, and beneath all of it, a strange quiet warmth. Somewhere in a sterile hospital room, a man was breathing because she hadn't looked away. She didn't know his name when she saved him. Now that she did, she wished she didn't. In the hospital room, Peter stirred awake. The beeping of the monitors filled the silence. His throat burned when he tried to swallow. A nurse checked his vitals, adjusting his IV line. "You're lucky, Mr. King. Someone pulled you out before the car caught fire." He tried to speak, voice hoarse. "Who?" She didn't leave a name, the nurse said. Just said she was a nurse on her way home. Saved your life. He closed his eyes again, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw her rain eyes' warmth. He didn't know why it mattered so much. But for the first time in years, he wanted to remember someone. He whispered into the empty room, "Find her." The first thing Peter King saw when he woke was light, harsh white, too clean. Then the smell of antiseptic, the slow rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. He blinked against the glare. His throat was dry, his chest ached, his body felt like lead. Somewhere nearby a voice hummed low, almost melodic. When his vision cleared, he saw her. A woman sat beside his bed, her skin the color of warm earth hair, tied loosely at the back. She was writing something on a chart, a small crease between her brows. When she noticed he was awake, her expression softened. "You're going to be fine," she said, voice calm but firm. "You've got a concussion, 3 fractured ribs, and a miracle on your side." Her tone had no awe in it, just quiet assurance. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "No one special. Just doing my job." For the next few hours, Peter drifted in and out of consciousness. He caught fragments, nurses checking IVs, the steady hum of machines, her voice calling instructions. Sometimes when he stirred, he'd see her silhouette reflected in the glass door, standing with arms crossed, exhausted but alert. When she finally left the room, the air felt colder. By morning, the world outside his window had turned gold. His assistant David arrived frantic, clutching a phone. "The media's gone crazy. Someone leaked your crash. They're calling her the nurse who saved the billionaire. Reporters are camping outside." Peter ignored him. "The woman. What's her name?" David hesitated. "She didn't sign the witness release. Just A. Johnson." She refused the interview request. Peter leaned back, eyes closed. Find her. 2 days later, Vivian's world turned inside out. News vans crowded the street outside her apartment complex. Cameras flashed. A reporter shoved a microphone toward her. "Miss Johnson, how does it feel to save one of the richest men in America?" She froze, clutching her grocery bag tighter. "It's not about that. Please, I'm just—" But the crowd didn't listen. They wanted a headline, not a human being. Inside her small one-bedroom apartment, Vivian shut the blinds and let out a shaky breath. Her phone buzzed with dozens of messages, old classmates, hospital staff, even strangers thanking or criticizing her. In one viral comment thread, someone wrote, "Bet she's hoping he'll pay her off. Typical gold digger move." Vivian turned off her phone. She wasn't angry. She was tired of proving that kindness didn't need a motive. That night, she sat by the window, staring at the city lights beyond the rain-smeared glass. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to remember his face. Pale, bleeding, but alive. There had been something in his eyes that night, something raw, almost childlike. But he belonged to a world she had no place in, a world that could buy anything, even gratitude. 3 days later, she opened her door and froze. Standing in the dim hallway was Peter King himself, dressed simply, no security entourage. Just a man holding a bouquet of white tulips wrapped in paper. Rain clung to his coat collar, his hair damp. "Mr. King," she started, but he cut in softly. "Peter, please." He handed her the flowers. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." She hesitated before taking them. "You already thanked me by staying alive." He gave a small smile, looking around the narrow hallway, peeling paint, flickering lights, the faint hum of a broken elevator nearby. "This isn't exactly the kind of place I imagined my guardian angel living in," he said lightly. "I'm not an angel," Vivian replied. "Just a nurse who was at the wrong place at the right time." "Then I'm glad you were," he said quietly. His gaze lingered on her face, longer than politeness allowed. When she didn't invite him in, he asked gently, "May I come in for just a minute?" Vivian hesitated. Her instincts said no, too dangerous, too intimate. But her heart betrayed her. She stepped aside. The apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon soap. Books stacked in corners. A thrift store lamp beside a couch patched with tape. A kettle hissed softly on the stove. Peter looked around, saying nothing. Every detail screamed of a life stripped down to essentials. No excess, no noise. He suddenly felt self-conscious about his tailored coat, his $1,000 shoes. She poured tea into mismatched mugs and handed him one. "I don't usually have billionaires in my living room," she said, a teasing edge under her calm voice. He took a sip, smiling faintly. "And I don't usually wake up to find one has saved my life." They both laughed awkwardly briefly. Then silence settled between them. He studied her, the way her hair curled slightly at her neck, the scar on her wrist, the steadiness in her gaze. There was something about her that made the noise in his head go quiet. "Do you ever regret helping someone?" he asked suddenly. Vivian looked at him surprised. "Regret saving a life?" "Never. But sometimes I regret how people treat you for it." He nodded slowly. "They think you want something. They always do," she said softly. "Especially when you're not the kind of person they expect to stand beside someone like you." That struck deeper than she knew. He set his cup down, the porcelain clinking softly. "I don't know if I deserve what you did, but if there's anything I can do—" She interrupted. Don't turn this into a debt. I didn't save you, so you'd owe me something." Her tone was gentle but firm. He looked down, embarrassed. "Then why did you—" She shrugged. "Because someone needed to. That's enough for me." The simplicity of her answer disarmed him. He wasn't used to being looked at without an agenda. He'd met women who wanted his name, his company, his fortune, never one who wanted nothing at all. He left after an hour. Before going, he turned to her at the door. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a fool," he said. "But when I woke up that night, I thought you were light. Everything else was dark, and you were the only thing that felt real." Vivian's lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. "Light fades, Mr. King. Don't depend on it to guide you." Then maybe, he said, "I'll try to learn how to see in the dark." He stepped out into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him. For days afterward, Vivian told herself to forget. But every night she caught herself staring at the flowers still fresh on her windowsill, their white petals untouched by time. It wasn't attraction, she insisted. It was gratitude, curiosity, maybe sympathy. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. Meanwhile, Peter couldn't stop thinking about her. Between meetings and interviews, her face slipped into his mind, calm, composed, untouchable. He sent her a message through the hospital board, inviting her to a charity gala to honor her service. She declined. He tried again this time, less formally. Dinner, no press, no agenda. Just a man saying thank you. No reply. That night, standing by his penthouse window overlooking Atlanta's glittering skyline, Peter King, who had once bought and sold entire companies, realized he had no idea how to reach one woman who refused to be bought. He laughed bitterly. "She saved my life, and now she's ruining my ego." David, his assistant, looked up from his tablet. "Sir." Nothing, Peter said, just realizing how much noise money makes when it tries to talk to silence. A week later, a letter arrived at Vivian's clinic. Handwritten simple. Dear Miss Johnson, I don't want to disturb your peace. I just wanted to say you reminded me that not all rescues happen on the road. Sometimes they happen inside us quietly. Peter King. She folded the note carefully and tucked it inside her journal. She didn't know it yet, but something inside her shifted that day, a thread pulling two worlds closer, one heartbeat at a time. Outside, the evening light faded into the same gray-blue hue as the night they met. In the distance, thunder murmured over the city, not a storm this time, but a promise. The invitation arrived, folded inside an envelope, so elegant it almost felt like a mistake. White cardstock, embossed with gold lettering, Annual King Foundation Gala, benefiting children's health initiatives. Dress code, formal. And beneath it in handwriting she recognized, please come. No cameras, no speeches, just UAK. Vivian read it 3 times. Her first instinct was to tear it up. Her second was to admit a part of her wanted to go. For days, she fought with herself. The logical part whispered, don't walk into his world. The other part, quieter, more dangerous, murmured, he asked for you, not your uniform. When the night came, she stood in front of the mirror, longer than she should have. The gown she'd borrowed from a friend shimmered faintly the color of deep ocean. Her hair framed her face softly, her lips painted with just enough color to match the tulips still blooming on her windowsill. She told herself it was just an evening, nothing more. But when she stepped out into the city lights, even the rain held its breath. The ballroom of the King Foundation glowed with opulence, crystal chandeliers, violins weaving through the hum of conversation, champagne flutes catching the light. People moved like polished ghosts, their smiles rehearsed, their laughter hollow. When Vivian entered the room, stilled for a heartbeat, a ripple moved through the crowd. Curiosity, then judgment. A woman near the bar whispered behind a jeweled hand, she's the nurse, isn't she? The one from the accident. Another smirked. Must be nice to trade scrubs for silk. Vivian felt their gazes on her like heat under glass. Her heels clicked too loudly against the marble floor. She almost turned to leave until she saw him. Peter stood across the room in a tailored midnight suit, speaking with a senator. When he saw her, the conversation faded from his attention. He didn't smile, didn't gesture. He simply looked at her as if she were the only thing in the room that was real. He walked toward her through the crowd. Every head turned. The whispers multiplied. But Peter didn't notice, or perhaps he didn't care. You came, he said when he reached her. I shouldn't have, she replied, forcing a smile. I don't belong here. He offered his arm. Neither do I. They stood together near the stage as the auction began. Paintings sold for absurd prices, applause rang hollowly, and Vivian realized she'd never felt more out of place in her life. Everywhere she looked, she saw men in black suits and women in diamonds, a sea of faces that would never know what it meant to work 3 jobs to pay for night classes. She leaned close enough to whisper, this isn't kindness, it's theater. Peter's gaze followed hers, the laughter, the empty generosity. You're right, he said. That's why I want to change it. She turned to him, startled. He added quietly, you said once that saving someone isn't a debt. I think I finally understand what you meant. Before she could answer, the host called his name. Ladies and gentlemen, under Peter King, applause filled the room. Peter hesitated, glanced at her once, then stepped onto the stage. The spotlight found him instantly. He began with practiced composure, thanking donors, acknowledging guests. But then his tone shifted. He looked directly at Vivian, not hiding it, not pretending. Tonight, he said, I was supposed to give a speech about generosity. But I've learned something. Generosity means nothing if it costs you nothing. Murmurs spread through the audience. He continued, months ago I nearly died. A stranger saved my life, not because of who I was, but because she saw a human being worth saving. She didn't ask my name or what I owned. She just acted. That kind of courage is what I want to honor tonight. He paused, eyes still on her. She's here, and I'd like everyone to know she didn't come out of pity. She came out of the same strength that saved me that night. A sharp silence followed. Then applause, hesitant at first, then growing. Some faces smiled, others stiffened. But Peter didn't waver. Vivian felt her throat tighten. For years, she had fought to be seen for her work, not her skin, not her circumstances. And in one public dangerous gesture, he had given her what she'd never dared to demand: visibility, without shame. When he stepped down, she whispered as he passed, "You shouldn't have done that." He stopped beside her. "I didn't do it for them." After the gala, he found her on the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, the skyline glittering like broken glass scattered across velvet. She stood with her arms folded, eyes distant. "You made quite an impression," he said gently. "I didn't want to be your symbol, Peter," she said, voice quiet but edged. "You stood there and made me a story, your story." He flinched. "That wasn't my intent." "Intent doesn't erase power," she murmured. "You can afford mistakes. I can't." Silence stretched between them. The sound of traffic drifted up from below, distant and indifferent. Finally, he said, "You're right." His voice softened. "I've spent years talking about impact, about legacy. But maybe I've only been trying to fill a silence I created myself." Vivian turned to him. Then his face opened, stripped of charm and wealth. "Just a man tired and sincere." "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "The charities, the speeches, the sudden guilt." He exhaled, "Because for the first time, I want to be someone who deserves to live." Something in his tone broke her. The anger drained away, replaced by an ache she couldn't name. She took a step closer, close enough to see the faint scar still healing along his hairline. "You already do," she whispered. "You just haven't believed it yet." Inside the orchestra began a waltz. Laughter and champagne resumed their rhythm, but on the balcony time slowed. Peter held out his hand. "Dance with me, there's no music out here," she said. "There doesn't have to be." He placed his hand gently on her waist, the other finding her fingers. They moved slowly, an improvised dance under the night sky. The city lights their only audience. Her cheek brushed against his shoulder. She could smell the faint trace of cedar on his suit, the warmth beneath the surface of a man everyone called cold. For a moment she allowed herself to forget where they were, who they were supposed to be. For a moment she was just a woman dancing with the man she'd once pulled from death. When the song inside ended, he whispered, "If I told you I wanted you beside me, not as the woman who saved me, but as the one who makes me feel alive, would you believe me?" Vivian pulled back slightly. Her eyes shimmered under the soft light. "You shouldn't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." "Then, tell me anyway." She looked down, smiling faintly. "I'd like to. But I'm still learning where this road leads and whether I can walk it without losing myself." He wanted to reach for her again, but something in her tone warned him not to. He respected that. He always had. Maybe that's why he couldn't let her go. As they turned to leave the balcony, she stopped, her hand brushing against his sleeve. "There's a clinic I volunteer at," she said, "for women who can't afford care. We're short on supplies. Tell me what you need." he said instantly. No, she replied. Don't write a check. Come see it. See them. If you still want to help after that, you'll know how. He nodded slowly. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, she repeated. They didn't know it yet, but that promise, simple, unguarded, would be the thread that tied their worlds together and later tear them apart. As Vivian walked down the marble steps outside the ballroom, the night breeze caught her dress and lifted it slightly like an ocean wave, retreating from shore. She glanced back once through the glass doors. Peter watched her go. Between them stretched two worlds, his glittering but hollow, hers, quiet but real. Somewhere in between, their hearts had already begun to find each other. Above, thunder murmured over the horizon, distant, gentle. A storm was coming again. Neither of them knew it would be the kind that no one could save the other from. The morning it all began, the world woke up to a lie that sounded almost true. Vivian Johnson, hero or gold digger. Inside the billionaire's heart is love, her greatest rescue mission yet. The headlines spread like wildfire. By sunrise, Vivian's face was everywhere, splashed across glossy screens and breakfast talk shows. The photo they chose was cruel. Her in the blue dress from the gala, eyes down, lips parted, mid-breath, vulnerable, framed as guilty. At first, she didn't even know. She was at the clinic taking a patient's blood pressure when her phone began vibrating again and again. Nurses whispered in the hallway, glancing toward her. When she finally read the article, the world tilted slightly. They called her a woman with ambition, masked as virtue. They dug into her childhood, her mother's job as a housekeeper, even her student loans. Every line of the story seemed to whisper the same thing. She didn't save him. She trapped him. Her hands trembled as she turned off the phone. The clinic's fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. In the next room, a child cried. She took a deep breath and went back to work, because that was what she knew how to do. Keep breathing when the world refused to. Across the city, Peter King threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the glass wall of his office. His assistant David flinched but said nothing. Find out who leaked it. Peter ordered, voice sharp as broken ice. Every journalist, every name. Sir, it's everywhere. Someone in your PR team must have. I said find out. He snapped. He stormed to the window overlooking downtown Atlanta. The city glittered beneath him, indifferent, merciless. He'd seen headlines about himself before, ruthless, scandalous, cruel, and he'd never cared. But this one was different. Because this time, the target wasn't him. It was her. He called his lawyers, his media strategists, anyone who could silence the noise. They promised to control the narrative. But he knew what that meant. They'd paint Vivian as a footnote in his redemption story. They'd use her dignity as a weapon. And worse, they'd be right, because somewhere deep down, he had given them the ammunition. When the storm hit full force, Vivian stopped answering calls. Her clinic's front door was swarmed by reporters. Patients slipped out the back, embarrassed to be seen. She finally closed early, heart aching with something heavier than anger betrayal. That night, rain returned, relentless, familiar. She sat on the floor of her apartment, the tulips long wilted, the newspaper on her lap. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger. She had believed in him, in his quiet sincerity, in the way he had looked at her that night under the city lights, as though she were more than the noise around her. But the article had details no one should have known. Private details. How could they have known her mother's name? Her college debts, the hospital where she'd first worked before being laid off. There was only one person who could have accessed all that. The thought hit her like cold water. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. But the truth, like the rain, kept dripping until denial drowned in it. When Peter finally reached her, she was already halfway gone. He found her outside the clinic the next afternoon, locking up early. Her hair clung to her face, soaked by the drizzle. She didn't look surprised to see him, only tired. "Vivian," he started. "I'm handling it." "The article." "Did you?" she interrupted. "Handle it before or after you handled me?" He froze. "What are you talking about?" She stepped closer, eyes sharp with hurt. "You investigated me, didn't you? You had someone dig through my life." He swallowed hard. "I just say yes." He hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. She laughed softly, the sound brittle. "You wanted to trust me, but you needed proof first." "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. I needed to protect you, to protect us." "There are people who protect me," she cut in, voice rising. "By invading my life, by turning me into your case file." Her words cracked something inside him. He reached for her, but she stepped back. "You think I don't know what the world says about me, about women like me? I spent my whole life proving I belong where I stand. And then you, the one man I thought saw me, decided to verify if I was real." "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "No, Peter," she whispered. "You made a choice." The rain grew heavier. Traffic lights blurred red and gold across the wet pavement. Between them, silence stretched, a silence filled with everything they didn't know how to say. Finally, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When she opened it, the necklace he'd given her, a silver chain with a tiny diamond pendant, glimmered weakly under the rain. "Here," she said, holding it out. "You should have it back. It doesn't belong to me." He didn't take it. "Please don't do this." She looked up, rain streaking her face, like tears she refused to shed. "You trust everyone with your empire, Peter. Your lawyers, your bankers, your shareholders. But not me. Not the woman who pulled you out of that car." Her voice broke then, not loud, not dramatic, just human. "You believe in everything except love." He stepped forward, desperate. "Vivian." She shook her head and turned away, pressing the necklace into his palm. The metal was cold between them, a final exchange neither wanted to make. Without another word, she walked into the rain, not looking back, not slowing down. The faint scent of her perfume, jasmine and rainwater, lingered in the air long after she disappeared. He stood there until the storm swallowed her silhouette. Back in his penthouse, Peter placed the necklace on his desk beside the unopened bottle of whiskey he'd once sworn off. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for the glass. He just sat in the dark, replaying her words again and again, until they became part of the silence. "You believe in everything except love." He picked up the phone, ready to call her, but stopped. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he was scared? That the only way he'd ever known how to care was by controlling the city lights blurred outside the window? He realized he had no one left to blame. Not the media, not his team, just himself, the man who had everything and still managed to lose the only thing that mattered. In her small apartment across town, Vivian sat on the edge of her bed, hair still damp from the rain. The necklace-shaped mark on her skin felt like a ghost's touch. She opened her journal and wrote a single line. "Sometimes the people we save are the ones who break us." Her phone buzzed once, an unknown number. She didn't answer. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. From her window, she could see the city skyline in the distance, tall, glittering, unreachable. For the first time, she didn't feel awe looking at it. She felt free and alone. Days passed. The scandal cooled, as they always do. New gossip replaced old wounds. But some wounds don't fade, they only learn how to breathe quietly, beneath the surface. At the King Foundation, Peter announced a new initiative, a medical grant, under Vivian's name. He did it privately, no press, no cameras. When asked why, he simply said, "Because truth doesn't need an audience." He never told her. She never asked. Weeks later, Vivian found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside, no note, no name. Only a check, unsigned, blank. She tore it in half without hesitation. But as she looked down, a small card fell out. On it, in his handwriting, "I can't undo what I did. But I can learn. If there's ever a day you let me try again, I'll be waiting, no spotlight, no noise. Just me." She closed her eyes and exhaled. For a moment she almost smiled, not because she forgave him, but because she still could feel something at all. Then she whispered to no one in particular, "Maybe one day." Outside, the streetlights flickered, and the city exhaled with her. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbled, the same soft promise that once brought them together. The city faded behind her like a fever dream, all glass rain and ghosts she could no longer carry. Vivian drove through the gray morning, one suitcase in the back seat, the hum of the road her only companion. She didn't look back. The highway stretched endlessly, leading her toward nowhere, and maybe peace. By dusk, the skyline of Atlanta had dissolved into farmland and pine trees. The air smelled of wet soil, freedom, and something almost like healing. She found a small town an hour south of Savannah, the kind of place where strangers still waved at passing cars, and no one cared about last names. A shuttered bakery on the corner had a sign that read, "For rent." Beside it stood an old brick building with peeling paint, St. Mary's Community Clinic. That night, she unpacked her few belongings in a tiny rented room above a diner. Outside her window, the rain whispered against the glass, and for the first time in months, she slept not peacefully, but without tears. Weeks turned into months. Vivian threw herself into work at the clinic, patching wounds, prescribing antibiotics, holding trembling hands. The women she treated were invisible to the world, homeless, forgotten, broken in different ways. She saw herself in them, all those who had loved too much, trusted too fast, and paid for it in silence. The mornings were heavy with humidity, the afternoons with the slow rhythm of cicadas. But at night, when the world quieted, her loneliness grew loud. That was when she began writing, not letters to Peter, but to the small life fluttering inside her. "Dear little one, I don't know what kind of world I'm bringing you into, but I promise it will be one where love doesn't need permission. You don't need his name. You only need my heart." She kept the notebook under her pillow. Every night another entry. Every morning another heartbeat inside her, growing stronger. Sometimes when she placed her hand on her belly, she whispered, "You are the part of him I can keep without losing myself." By the 7th month, the clinic's director noticed her belly and smiled. "You'll be a wonderful mother," she said kindly. Vivian smiled back, but inside she wondered what kind of mother begins a story by running away. One evening, as thunder rolled over the horizon, she sat on the clinic's porch watching the rain. The scent of wet earth brought back a memory she had buried that night on the highway, his voice breaking through the storm. "Don't let go." She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering into the dark, "I didn't." "You did." Meanwhile, in the city, she left behind Peter King was unraveling. Every morning he woke before dawn, poured coffee he never finished, and wrote letters he never sent. They piled up on his desk, page after page, of ink-stained confessions. "I still see you in the rain. I still hear you when I close my eyes. If I could trade every dollar for one more chance, I would. He kept them all in a leather box marked A.J. David. His assistant noticed the change, the empty boardroom chairs, the canceled meetings, the long silences. "Sir," he said one morning gently, "you can't fix what doesn't want to be found." Peter looked up from his desk, eyes hollow. "She didn't vanish," he murmured. "She just stopped needing me." And that was somehow worse. In early autumn, Vivian went into labor. It was past midnight when her water broke, sudden sharp as thunder cracked the sky outside. The midwife from the clinic stayed by her side, hands steady, voice calm. Hours blurred into pain and sweat and breathless prayer. Then a cry. Then another. Two perfect, fragile voices split the night in half. Vivian looked down and saw them. Two girls, small fists curling, eyes still closed to the world. One had skin pale as cream, the other deep like hers. Both were beautiful. She laughed through tears, whispering, "You found each other before I even held you." When the midwife asked for names, Vivian answered softly, "Hope and Lila." Hope for the piece of her that still believed, Lila for the piece that had learned to let go. Motherhood changed her in quiet ways. She rose before dawn to feed them, sang lullabies learned from her mother's voice, mended their tiny socks by candlelight. Her days were stitched with exhaustion and grace, and every night when both girls slept curled against her, she would watch their chests rise and fall and whisper, "You are my second chance at peace." But sometimes when one of them smiled in her sleep, a smile with his dimple, his tilt, Vivian's breath caught. No matter how far she'd run, the memory of him lived in their faces. Back in Atlanta, Peter tried to rebuild himself the only way he knew, through purpose. He poured money into clinics, foundations, scholarships, anything that bore her name, without ever saying it aloud. He thought good deeds might soften the guilt. But guilt is stubborn. It doesn't fade. It becomes ritual. Every night he sat at his desk and wrote another letter. He never mailed them. He only sealed them and placed them in the box, one for every day she didn't return. If you're reading this, I want you to know I'm not angry you left. I'm angry that I gave you a reason to. You taught me how to love someone without owning them. I just wish I'd learned it before losing you. If you ever wonder whether I waited, I still am. A year passed. In the small town, the girls grew. Hope, bold and curious. Lila, quiet and watchful. Vivian kept the world small for them. A porch swing, a cracked garden path, the scent of jasmine blooming at dusk. She didn't tell them about their father, not yet. But sometimes when the news mentioned Peter King and his new philanthropic ventures, she would turn off the TV, stare at the dark screen and whisper, "He's trying." It wasn't forgiveness. It was truth. And truth was the only bridge left between them. One evening as she closed the clinic, a volunteer handed her the mail, mostly bills and donation receipts. At the bottom of the stack lay an envelope with no return address. The handwriting stopped her cold. She knew it instantly, clean, angular, deliberate. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just one line. "If you read this, I'm still waiting somewhere between two storms." Vivian's fingers trembled. For a long time, she couldn't move. Then she folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her heart, before slipping it into her journal, the same one she had written to her daughters in. She whispered to the sleeping house, "Maybe the rain isn't always meant to end. Maybe it's just meant to teach us how to begin again." That night the twins stirred in their crib. Vivian sat beside them, brushing a curl from Lila's forehead, adjusting Hope's blanket. For a moment everything was still, the clock ticking softly. The rain outside, steady and kind. She looked out the window at the distant line of trees, shadows swaying under lightning. And though she would never admit it aloud, her heart whispered the truth. She missed him. Not the man in the headlines, not the billionaire, but the broken soul who once looked at her as if she were the only light left in a drowning world. She closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her, not to relive it, but to remember. Because sometimes remembering is the only way to survive loving someone you can't return to. 3 years had passed since Vivian left the city, 3 quiet years, stitched together by small miracles. Hope and Lila were now walking, laughing, asking questions about everything under the sun. Life was simple, if not easy, early mornings at the clinic, evenings, filled with lullabies and the soft chaos of motherhood. Vivian had learned to live with silence. She had stopped checking the news, stopped looking for his name. The wound had healed, not perfectly, but honestly. Until one morning, an email arrived. Dear Ms. Johnson, we're honored to invite you to speak at the National Conference for Equity in Medicine. Your work has been transformative. Committee Chair, Atlanta Medical Association. Atlanta. The city she had sworn never to return to. The city where everything had ended, and maybe where something still waited to begin. The auditorium was vast, humming with conversation and camera flashes. Doctors, philanthropists, and officials filled the seats, their badges gleaming under the stage lights. Backstage. Vivian adjusted the microphone clipped to her dress. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, when she rehearsed under her breath, was steady. She wasn't here to prove anything. Not anymore. When her name was announced, the applause rose like a wave. She stepped into the light, confident, composed, radiant, in her navy dress. And then, halfway through the applause, she heard it. Please welcome our next speaker, the director of the King Foundation, Mr. Peter King. Her world stilled. The name struck her chest like thunder. She turned her head, and there he was. He looked different, thinner, quieter. The sharp edges of arrogance sanded down into something human. His hair had grown slightly streaked with gray at the temples. His eyes, once piercing now, carried the weary calm of a man who had learned to live with his ghosts. Their gazes met across the stage. Neither smiled. Neither looked away. He inclined his head slightly, not as a greeting, but as an apology. Vivian's speech came first. She spoke about access to care, the biases in treatment, the invisible weight carried by women of color in medicine. Her voice didn't waver, but her heart beat too loudly. She could feel his presence behind her, waiting for his turn, every word she spoke brushing against the silence between them. When she finished, the audience stood in ovation. As she stepped down, she caught a glimpse of him moving toward the podium. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, he began. His tone was low, deliberate. Your words remind us why we're here, to heal, not just with science, but with conscience. He didn't look at her directly, but she knew every sentence was meant for her. And sometimes he added, voice softer, now we spend years trying to heal others, when the one we hurt most is the reason we started in the first place. The audience murmured in approval, unaware of the confession woven between the lines. Vivian's breath caught, but she forced herself to walk away down the aisle, through the sea of applause, until she reached the corridor outside. The hallway was quiet, echoing only with distant footsteps. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to slow her heartbeat. Then a voice, low and familiar, Vivian. She turned. He stood a few feet away. No security, no entourage. Just him, the man she had once loved and lost. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered. I almost didn't, she admitted. But I realized running doesn't erase history. It only rewrites it in silence. He smiled faintly. You always had a better way with words. Silence hovered between them, not heavy, just fragile. Finally, she said, You look different. So do you, he murmured. Happier. I had to be, she replied softly. There were too little reasons I couldn't afford not to be. She turned slightly, and that's when he saw them. Down the hall, two small girls stood by the window holding hands. Identical curls, identical wide eyes. One with skin the color of honey, the other with a deeper shade, like Vivian's own. They were whispering to each other, giggling the picture of innocence. Peter froze. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. Are they? His voice faltered. Ours. Vivian didn't answer, not with words. She simply looked at him, eyes shimmering. That was enough. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter if he moved too fast. When he reached them, the girls turned curiously. Hi, Hope, said boldly. Are you Mommy's friend? Peter knelt down. His throat tightened. I'd like to be. Lila, the quieter one, tilted her head. Why are you crying? He laughed through a sob. Because I'm happy. I didn't think I'd ever get to meet you. Vivian's breath caught as she watched him. The man who had once hidden behind glass walls and headlines now knelt barefoot in the ashes of his mistakes, speaking to two children as if they were his redemption. He looked up at her, eyes wet. They're perfect. They're yours, she whispered. Every heartbeat. For a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. No past, no scandal, no distance. Just four souls rediscovering each other in a hallway full of ghosts. Peter reached out his hands. Both girls hesitated, then moved closer, small fingers curling around his. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of their touch. I'm sorry, he said quietly to all three of them, for everything I missed, for every day I didn't know you. Vivian felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she didn't hide them. Some tears are not weakness, they're release. You can't fix lost time, she said gently, but you can start showing up now. He nodded, voice breaking. I'll never leave again. Not them, not you. They walked outside together. The sky was a pale blue touched with smoke from distant wildfires, the kind of beauty born from destruction. Ashes drifted faintly in the air, catching sunlight, like dust made of forgiveness. The girls ran ahead toward the fountain in the plaza, chasing each other's laughter. Vivian and Peter stood side by side watching them, not speaking, because sometimes silence says enough. After a long moment, he asked softly, Do they know about me? She shook her head. Not yet. They only know their mother loved someone once, someone who taught her how to be brave. He swallowed hard. Then let me earn the rest of the story. When they returned to the hotel later that evening, Vivian tucked the girls into bed. From the doorway, Peter watched as she smoothed their blankets and kissed their foreheads. They look like angels, he whispered. She turned to him, smiling sadly. They're the best parts of both of us. He stepped closer. Vivian, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to be in their lives, whatever that means, even if it's just as the man who finally showed up. She looked at him for a long time, measuring the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet in his posture. Then she nodded. We'll take it one day at a time. He exhaled the first real breath of peace in years. As he left the room, she called after him almost without thinking. Peter. He turned. She hesitated, then said softly, They both love the rain. Guess they got that from you." He smiled, eyes glistening. Then maybe the storm did bring us something after all. Later that night, Vivian stood by the window. Outside, the city shimmered the same skyline that once held her heartbreak, now holding a fragile kind of hope. She whispered to herself, "People don't always change, but sometimes they come back, gentler." Behind her, the twins stirred in their sleep, one murmuring "Mama," the other turning toward the window, chasing a dream of rain. And somewhere deep inside her, something that had been closed for years began slowly, quietly to open again. The house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, where children's laughter replaced the sound of sirens, and morning sunlight spilled across a white picket fence. It wasn't the mansion Peter had been used to, nor the penthouse overlooking the skyline. It was smaller, humbler, but alive. Here, the walls were painted by tiny fingerprints. The scent of formula crayons and coffee mingled in the air, and somewhere between midnight cries and morning giggles, the rhythm of family took root. Peter King, once the man who commanded boardrooms and controlled empires, was now the man fumbling with a baby bottle at 3 a.m. The first night, he spilled milk on the counter twice, burned his hand warming the water, and nearly fell asleep standing. Vivian watched from the doorway, arms crossed, hiding her smile. "You're holding it upside down," she teased softly. He looked up, eyes bleary but determined. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "A little," she admitted. He sighed, turning the bottle right side up. "I've led billion-dollar companies, negotiated mergers across continents. But this," he glanced at the squirming baby in his arms, "this is harder." Vivian walked over, adjusting the bottle with practiced ease. "That's because this isn't a deal, Peter. This is love." He looked at her, then truly looked, and for the first time realized how fragile, how astonishingly human love could be. Days became weeks. Hope learned to run before she could walk properly, always tumbling into her father's arms with fearless joy. Lila, quieter, liked to sit by the window, her small hands pressed against the glass, as if reaching for the world outside, just like her mother Peter would whisper, watching them. Always seeing light where others see reflection. Vivian laughed. "And hopes your twins stubborn and charming in equal measure." He grinned. "At least she gets the charm from me." Vivian rolled her eyes, but smiled, her heart softening at the sound of laughter echoing through the home. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever: safety. But healing doesn't come without shadows. There were nights when Vivian woke to find Peter sitting in the living room staring at old photographs, his mother, his ex-wife, his past self. The faint light from the street lamp made him look almost like a boy, again, lost in a world too large for him. One night she sat beside him. "Do you ever regret?" "All of it." He didn't look up. "Every day. But not for the reasons you think." "Then why?" "Because I wasted so much time thinking success was a fortress." He turned to her eyes, weary but clear. "And all it ever did was keep love out." She reached for his hand, warm, calloused, trembling slightly. For a moment neither spoke. Outside, a distant thunder rolled gentle and far away. Weeks later came the twins' first birthday. The backyard bloomed with soft lanterns and white ribbons. Neighbors, co-workers from the clinic, and families from the women's shelter filled the garden. Laughter rose like birds taking flight. Vivian carried Lila while Peter lifted Hope high into the air, her squeals of delight ringing through the evening. "Careful," Vivian called, pretending to scold. "I've got her," he said, smiling a smile so unguarded it startled her. There was a time when every photo of Peter King had the same expression, the half-smile of a man who'd already won. But now his face carried something new: softness, peace. He was no longer trying to conquer the world. He was simply living in it. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the girls were asleep, the two of them sat on the porch, the last of the candles flickering in the breeze. Peter leaned back, his voice low. "You know, I used to think I was born to win." Vivian glanced at him, amused. "And now?" He exhaled slowly, looking out into the quiet night. "Now I think I was born to lose, just enough to learn how to love." She turned toward him, the weight of his words settling in her chest. "Lose what exactly?" He smiled faintly. "My pride, my control, my need to always be right. Because these two little girls, they've taught me that love isn't victory, it's surrender." Vivian's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful kind of surrender." He looked at her then, and in the reflection of her eyes, he saw not the man he had been, but the man he was becoming. Inside, the twins stirred in their sleep. Hope murmured something about stars. Lila whispered "Mama" before curling deeper into her blanket. Vivian went in to check on them, smoothing the hair from their foreheads, kissing their warm cheeks. From the doorway, Peter watched her, the curve of her back, the tenderness in her touch. He realized that love wasn't a thunderclap. It was the quiet act of showing up again and again. A few weeks later, Vivian was invited to a fundraising dinner, hosted by the foundation they had built together, the King Johnson Initiative for Women's Health. It was a formal affair filled with donors and polished speeches, but when Vivian looked out over the crowd, she didn't see power. She saw faces, the single mothers, nurses, and young women whose lives had changed because of second chances. After the applause died down, she stepped aside, letting Peter take the stage. He spoke simply, without notes, without bravado. "I used to think charity was about giving," he said. "But Vivian taught me that it's about sharing what breaks us, what builds us, what binds us. For years I lived behind glass walls, afraid to let anyone see through the cracks. But sometimes it's the broken glass that lets the light in." The room fell silent. From her seat, Vivian felt her throat tighten. The crowd saw a reformed billionaire. She saw a man who had finally learned humility. When he stepped down, their eyes met. No grand gestures, no applause between them. Just a quiet knowing, a peace earned, not performed. That night when they got home, Vivian tucked the twins into bed and lingered by the window. The city lights shimmered faintly in the distance, the same city that had once hurt them, now glowing softly, as if apologizing. Peter came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The noise, the power, the chase." She leaned back into him. "No," she said simply, "because for the first time, I'm not surviving. I'm living." He pressed his chin to her shoulder. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," she smiled faintly. "But love makes it worth trying." He held her closer, whispering, "I used to see love as something to win. Now I see it as something to keep learning." Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping gently against the glass. They stood there in silence, watching the droplets trace their way down the pane, tiny rivers of silver under the moonlight. The window had a small crack at the corner, from where Hope had once thrown her toy in excitement. Vivian traced the line of the crack with her finger. "You know," she said softly, "broken glass still catches the light." He looked at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "And maybe that's what we are, still cracked but shining anyway." She turned to him and smiled. "Exactly." In the distance, thunder rolled gentle, no longer threatening. It sounded like closure, or maybe the beginning of something new. The girls stirred in their sleep, their small shadows moving behind the nursery door. Vivian whispered, "They'll grow up knowing that love isn't perfect. It's just real." Peter nodded. And that's enough. They stood there for a long time, two people framed in a broken window illuminated by the faint forgiving light. A year had passed since the rain stopped chasing them. The house in the suburbs had grown quieter, not empty, but serene. The twins, now 4, filled its corners with laughter and muddy footprints. Every morning, Hope insisted on pouring her own cereal, and every night, Lila fell asleep holding the small silver pendant that once belonged to her mother. Time, Vivian often thought, was the only contract they could never rewrite. Yet it was also the one that had finally brought them peace. When the letter arrived on creamy white paper embossed with gold, she read it twice. Heart-fluttering. King Johnson Foundation for Women Official Launch Gala. Keynote Address. Dr. Vivian Johnson. Special announcement. Peter King, co-founder. For a long moment, she just stared at the words. The name, King Johnson, looked strange, beautiful, like two worlds that once collided, now learning to coexist. She thought of the women she'd treated, the stories they carried, nurses, single mothers, women of color, who had been told no too many times. Now their names would stand at the front of a foundation meant to rewrite that word into enough. She smiled. It's time, she whispered, as the morning sun filtered through the cracked window. The same one that had once symbolized their brokenness, now glowing with gold. The gala was held in downtown Atlanta, in the same glass auditorium where Peter had once stood alone, surrounded by empty applause. Tonight, it looked different, warmer, filled with people who believed in something larger than wealth. Banners read, "Equity, Healing, Hope." As Vivian entered, the crowd rose in quiet admiration. She wore a simple ivory dress, elegant but unpretentious, a reflection of everything she had become. The twins followed close behind in pale pink dresses, clutching baskets of white roses. Peter stood near the stage watching. He still wore his signature black suit, but there was no trace of the untouchable mogul he once was. His shoulders had softened, his eyes clear, his smile unguarded. When their eyes met, the world around them seemed to fade like two chapters, finally finding the same page. The evening began with speeches from doctors, activists, and community leaders. Stories of lives changed echoed through the hall, scholarships, free clinics, shelters rebuilt. Every initiative bore traces of both their hearts. Her compassion, his conviction. Then came the final segment. The host took the stage microphone in hand. Tonight, she announced, we celebrate not only a foundation, but a story, one that began with rain and ended with light. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Peter King. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed, but Peter ignored them. He stepped to the podium, a folded sheet of paper in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of what he was about to say. Years ago, he began, voice steady but quiet. I thought power could fix anything, that money could buy peace, that control could protect me from heartbreak. But then I met someone who saved my life, not by pulling me from the wreckage of a car, but from the wreckage of myself. A murmur rippled through the audience. Vivian, seated in the front row, lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. Peter unfolded the paper. I've written many contracts in my life. Deals, mergers, partnerships. All of them temporary. All of them driven by fear of loss. He paused. The room stilled. But tonight, I want to sign a different kind of contract. One that isn't built on power, but on faith. He lifted the paper. The handwritten words illuminated under the stage light. Term, lifetime, value. Priceless title. Mrs. King, a hush swept across the hall, so complete it felt sacred. Peter looked up, eyes glistening. This isn't a proposal. he said softly. It's a confession that love, real love, doesn't expire. It just waits for us to grow brave enough to choose it again. In the audience, Vivian's breath caught. For a second, her world narrowed to the sound of his voice and the memory of every storm they had survived. Then gently, she rose from her seat. The twins watched in wide-eyed wonder as their mother walked toward the stage, the hem of her dress brushing the marble floor like a whisper. When she reached him, the applause began not loud, but warm, like the sound of hearts opening. Vivian took the paper from his hand, looked at it for a long time, then met his gaze. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "You don't need a contract, Peter," she said softly. "We've already signed it with blood and tears and love." The crowd was silent. Somewhere a camera clicked, freezing the moment not as a spectacle, but as proof that redemption could look like tenderness. Peter smiled, that quiet, boyish smile that once hid behind arrogance, now stripped bare. He stepped closer, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "Then let me keep living by it." He kissed her forehead, not a grand gesture, just a promise, made visible. Behind them, Hope and Lila ran up laughing, scattering rose petals into the air. The petals caught the light, spinning like small white miracles before settling around their parents' feet. For the first time, Vivian noticed the hall's glass ceiling, repaired since the last storm, each pane catching the golden glow of evening. What was once shattered now shimmered, broken, but beautiful. As the audience stood, applause swelling like sunlight, Vivian turned toward the crowd. Her voice trembled only slightly when she spoke. "This foundation isn't about us," she said. "It's about every woman who was told her story wasn't worth saving. It's about every mother who gave more than she had, every daughter who refused to disappear." She looked down at her daughters, Hope and Lila, their small hands clutching rose stems. "And it's about teaching them that love doesn't erase difference. It gives us the courage to face it and to heal." Tears glistened across the room. Peter reached for her hand. "You see?" he whispered. "You've always been the stronger one." Vivian smiled faintly. "No. We just finally stopped fighting the wrong battles." Later that night, when the guests were gone and the city quieted, they returned to the empty stage. The lights had dimmed, but the roses still lay scattered like stars across the floor. Vivian stood by the glass wall, gazing at the skyline. Peter came up behind her, his reflection merging with hers in the window's faint glow. "It's strange," she murmured. "For years that glass reminded me of everything we broke." He touched the pane gently, where a faint crack still remained. "Maybe that's why it shines brighter now." She turned to him. "Do you think we deserve this?" After everything, he smiled, tracing the faint scar on her wrist, the one from that night on the highway. "No one deserves love," he said softly. "We just learn how to receive it." She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. Through the glass, the city lights flickered, no longer distant, but home. From the far end of the hall, Hope's small voice called, "Mommy, Daddy, look, stars." They turned to see both girls standing near the window, pointing upward. Outside, the night sky glittered, and for a brief moment, the reflection of their family appeared in the glass, framed by the city, by the past, by everything they had survived. Vivian took Peter's hand. "Do you see it?" she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, our story right there in the light." She smiled, her eyes wet but shining. "Then let's keep writing it. Love doesn't erase differences. It teaches us to face them, to see beauty in the cracks, and to build something stronger from what was once broken." If this story made you smile, choose kindness for someone today. Because sometimes a small act of grace can save an entire life. In the reflection of the glass, Hope and Lila's laughter echoed the next generation of dreamers, ready to rewrite what love means. The story wasn't ending. It was just beginning again in the light.